welcome to the Young Adult Collective podcast. My name is Tilly and this is Matt.
We exist to help encourage, equip and inspire young adults to keep trusting in Jesus and making his name known both locally and globally.
Across these episodes, we'll be speaking to both friends and experts of CMS on a broad range of topics for young adults.
We hope you enjoy today's episode.
And we're back for episode 2 of our collective podcast. We hope you enjoyed last week's first episode on relationships and missions, and we're confident that you'll also enjoy this one.
I'm really excited. Matilda and I have never done a podcast before, so every single week we're getting a little bit better.
Hopefully.
So I'm really excited for you to tune into this one. Today we're lucky enough to chat with Andrew Gifford, who actually is my boss at CMS. And he was a missionary with his family in Bacelona for 10 years. And we're talking about prayer in isolation. Andrew is one of the most prayerful men I know, so I think it's going to be a really good episode. So come with us. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, but first, let's dig a little deeper into who we are.
We thought we'd start today's podcast chatting a little bit more about who we are. Who is CMS? What is the Young Adult Collective podcast? So firstly, we're going to be releasing episodes every fortnight. And our prayer and hope for these podcasts is that it would just be hugely encouraging to you. That the content would be really interesting and that would be very thought-provoking in these different areas. There's so much that we can learn as young people, and there's so many wise people out there that we can learn from. So we'll be chatting with missionaries with CMS, staff workers, and other friends connected in with CMS, talking about a whole range of topics, including culture, worldviews, mission, our relationship with God, our relationships with each other, and so much more. So there's going to be some really interesting stuff on this podcast, and we hope that you really enjoy it. We have a Facebook page. We'd love for you to connect in with us there. It's really easy to feel disconnected in this time, but we want to do our best to connect with you and engage with you. So please follow us on Facebook, comment on our posts. We'd love to chat with you.
And if there are topics that you want us to bring up, please as well comment below.
Absolutely. So there's many different ways to tune into this podcast. You can find us on all major podcasting platforms, including iTunes and Spotify. We're yet to make it onto Google Podcasts, but we're working on it. And you can also watch the video version of our podcast on YouTube if that's your preference.
Yeah, awesome. And something that we might have already mentioned is Matt and I do work for the staff of CMS Victoria. And CMS's heart really is to see a world that knows Jesus. And we offer opportunities for training and learning and equipping. And we've also got 2 communities that we have set aside for young adults specifically. And those 2 main areas are Mentac and our SIM groups. So Mentac stands for Mentoring Across All Nations, a bit of a tongue twister, but that is our formal apprenticeship program that we have started up for people who want to take this to the next level and who are really seriously considering going overseas and are ready to take that next step. Our SIM groups are actually run by Returned CMS missionaries, and that stands for Seriously Interested in Missions. That's a little bit more casual. They happen 4 to 5 times across the year, and usually over a shared meal, and you're learning from the experience of, real missionaries.
So we're really excited to bring this podcast to you. We're going to get better every episode, as we said before.
Pray for us.
But today we're going to get Andrew on a Zoom call and chat to him. Welcome, Andrew. It's great to see you. You've got a great background there. I identified the peace lily very quickly. A bit disappointed that it's not your own personal peace lily, but welcome.
Got to borrow these things sometimes, but, they're generous people around.
All for the cause of a good Zoom background.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Cool. So, Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Andrew. Currently, I work with CMS, Church Missionary Society here in Victoria. I've got a pretty long history. I think CMS now runs in my blood a fair amount. So before this last year, My family and I were missionaries in Spain with CMS, church planting. We were based in Bacelona. And yeah, I've got 4 kids aged between 18 and 8. 9.
Nope.
And
No, you
I've
kids.
got a dog as well, Winston. He's a rescue pet. And I have a wife, which is the most important of all those connections that I've got. And my role now with CMS is connecting with the churches and the individuals on this side of the ocean, helping them connect with their workers and being part of God's big, good plans for the world in Jesus.
Now, before we get too stuck into it, it's great to meet you. Andrew's my boss, so I've already met him. But Andrew, what is the weirdest thing you've seen on a Zoom or video call thus far?
I was watching some of my kids on their Zoom classes, and clearly their teachers aren't quite sure what to do. So there was one class in which there are a number of students who actually had movies playing behind them, like Big Hero 6 and other things like that going on, which I think was pretty distracting to the other kids in the class, but the teachers didn't know what to do. So there you go.
Yeah, we actually have someone in our Bible study who's a teacher, and she said that she's encountered students recording videos of themselves just sitting there and then making that their virtual background so that they don't have to sit there, and then they just leave. Isn't that amazing? Kids are becoming very intuitive, tech savvy in how to skip class on the internet.
Maybe we should do that in our staff meetings.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, it's great to be here. Andrew, I've only known you for maybe a year or two, but I've been very encouraged by your prayerfulness, which is what we're talking about today, prayer in isolation. So, Andrew, just quickly, why is prayer important to you?
Yeah, look, I reckon there's 2 aspects that I'd want to highlight why prayer is important. The first is the Bible tells us that God is spirit. And so if God is spirit, I need my spirit to talk with him. That's just the mechanics of how it works. You know, it reminds me of Psalm 139, which says, "You created my innermost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb, and I'm fearfully and wonderfully made." So the very heart of who I am and God being spirit need to come together, and prayer is the way to do that. But probably even more importantly is the fact that Jesus prayed. Jesus is clearly the smartest person that ever lived. So if he's the smartest guy who ever lived and he prayed, then why wouldn't I do that? I want to follow Jesus, not in that Instagram kind of way, which means I like him. I actually think that following Jesus means I want to practice what he practiced. So if he prayed and he's the smartest guy, why wouldn't I pray?
And I assume your prayer life hasn't always been super active. So how has your prayer life changed since you've been growing up from when you were a young adult like us?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's changed because I think one of the things that happens when you go from being a child to an adult is you go from this phase where, okay, my parents know everything, I just trust them, they're all superheroes, to actually my parents, there's kryptonite, there's things that get in the way and they don't get it right. And so when you move into that phase, you kind of ask a lot of questions. I grew up in a family that prayed, but then I actually had to ask the question, oh, my parents don't get everything right. Have they got this right? Is God really there? Am I really connecting with him? And so I think there was that basis that said, yes, God is there. I've learned that as a child, but now I have to own that for myself. And that's a long process. That's a relational thing. Like I said, God is spirit, and learning to connect with people, learning to connect with God takes time.
And I guess as a young adult, we are constantly have so many options and so many distractions that I know hinders me in my personal prayer life. What did you do, I guess, to turn off those distractions when you were, in your 20s, even 30s, or even now with the whole family in front of you as well?
Yeah, I think the distractions are real because, like I did say, it seems to me that we connect with God in a different way than we connect with with a person most of the time. We have to connect via our spirit. And we spend a lot of time throwing things into us. Like we put headphones in, we put things in front of our eyes, and that's really powerful. And so actually creating space in life where I can hear God is important. I realized when I was growing up that I spent a lot of time with headphones in, and I'm just kind of pumping my head with noise. Like, how am I going to hear God when I'm doing that all the time? I need to create spaces in which I really believe God's going to come into and be present, and I'm trying to work out how am I hearing Him. Likewise, what am I putting in front of my eyes? So like, if I'm always putting, like as a younger, I was putting magazines in front of my eyes or movies in front of my eyes, but I'm not actually putting God's word in front of my eyes, then how am I going to actually recognize when I am hearing God speak if that's not in front of my eyes as much as everything else?
Yeah. And so I guess from your experience, what does a healthy prayer life look like?
Yeah, a number of things. One of the phrases I've been using recently that I picked up from somewhere, I don't normally have many new ideas, but I like picking up other people's ideas, is
I
that
think we all do that.
what I need is a praying life, not a prayer life. And that's been really helpful for me. So a healthy prayer life is not that, oh yes, I pray at these times of the day, or I do prayer with these people, or I have my lists or whatever. It's not about that. It's actually, I have a praying life. My life, and the adjective is a description of my life in general. I think another thing is that I'm wanting a life in which I've got as much thanks to God, kind of yay God prayers, as there are asking God the hey God prayers in there. You know, I'm saying yay God a lot of the time, and I'm saying hey God as well, but they're balanced. And that balance is important because, as well as that, I want to show God my bad hair days. I want to show Him the days and be real with Him when I'm needing to say, hey, God. I think the Psalms are great. There's a really old bloke, way before my time, named John Calvin, who said, the Psalms are the anatomy of the soul. And so when you read the Psalms, you do meet people who are like telling God, this sucks, this isn't working. And you're kind of like, oh, can I say that? And yet, you know, Scripture's actually teaching us that. And I think that's really important, that God sees my bad hair days and I can talk about Him with that.
I think also, though, like through the Psalms, we see that we also need to be rejoicing in the Lord and celebrating the Lord. I would say that I'm the biggest culprit of only praying when I need something from God or when things aren't going right. And that's when I pray to God and, oh, Lord, please help me with this or make me feel better or whatever it is. But we see throughout the Bible that there's so many prayers that are just naming the truths of the Bible or rejoicing in who Jesus is or who God is, which I think is really important. So I find that that balance is really interesting and important.
Yeah, that's right. The yay God prayers, and you're right. It's the whole anatomy of the soul. There's so much joy in the Psalms. It's not just down in the deep. Yeah, right. Yeah. And getting that whole thing is really good for us. Yeah.
So you were a missionary in Barcelona for 10 years. I imagine that experience for you and your family led you guys to need God and need prayer a lot. So what did your prayer life look like, or what did you learn about prayer when you were on location in Barcelona?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's interesting, isn't it? You think in theory, when I went as a missionary, I already had it all worked out, which is just one of the big, fallacies, the big wrong thinking about missionaries. They go already having it all worked out. Actually, I learned a lot about prayer being there. I thought I'd learned a lot by the time I'd got there, and I suddenly realized I had a lot more to learn, which is really humbling. I think one of the things I learned, I can remember a time when I went through a stage where I just wanted to get into a praying life, and so I actually started to write some things on cards which were small enough to keep in my pocket. And anytime I had a quiet moment, I could pull them out and just go, yeah, these are some things I want to pray about today. And I could flick through some of them, and that kind of helped me think through some of what I was wanting to pray and people I wanted to pray. And it was a dark night. I was on my way to pick up my daughter from her gymnastics class, one of my daughters, and it was cold, and I was reading, I was going, you know, why am I praying for these people? Nothing's happening. And I remember God saying, but no one's ever prayed for them before. And that really humbled me. These were people I was relating to in Barcelona, and just recognizing just the privilege I had in bringing them before God and asking He would have mercy on them. So that was a real learning moment for me. The kind of prayer that said, realizing that it was a privilege to be praying for people. Another way that my prayer life grew is that we ended up running the school fiestas committee at our public school. So we were in Barcelona, Catalan culture, and there were these two Aussies running all the fiestas, which is a story in itself, but it's a pretty interesting situation. And we were way out of our depth because it wasn't our culture. But there were certain things that we needed to do, and one was an end-of-year fiesta, and we just didn't have the contacts. I'm still learning how things work here, and in Barcelona, and I just remember we realized we really needed to turn our morning prayer times into devoting this to God, and the number of times that throughout that day we then go, wow, God, you answered that prayer. There was a real classic one. We didn't know what to do for dessert for this fiesta. And we were just praying about this and saying, God, we don't know what to do. And then Don went into school, and a teacher came up to her and said randomly, hey, did you hear that there's this ice cream company that's giving away free ice creams? We went, no. And so we contacted them, and we got 600 free ice creams for the fiesta. Wow. And we just recognized in the progress how God was answering this really, in one sense, immaterial prayer. But it was all surrounded by our desire that God be known through what we were doing. People knew we were Christians. We're the only Christians in the whole school that we'd met. And so just seeing the extent of God's prayer, that He would even take this fiesta seriously and provide for us.
So, in other words, if we're stuck on dessert options, pray, God would deliver
if
ice
we're on
cream.
menu log, we need something to choose.
I kind of want to push prayer that far. You know, now what happened in that state was me actually realizing how out of control I was. And the great thing about it was that God helped me realize that He would even care about the number of hairs on my head or the number of ice creams I needed, so to speak. Yeah.
Do you have any other... Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
Do you have any... I was just going to say, do you have any other examples of how you've seen prayer bear fruit while you were in Barcelona?
I thought of there's another example that I'd give about just realizing the extent of prayer. So we lived in a situation, as I said, we didn't meet anyone else at our public school who went to a church of any kind. It's quite a secular city, Barcelona. When you think of Spain and you think there's parades of the Virgin Mary and lots of Roman Catholicism like that in the streets, in Barcelona they parade dragons and demons and run under fire. So that's what we do, what happened there in culture. So there weren't a lot of Christians around, and so we met a number. We had people from all different nationalities. One was a Japanese man who came and joined us and was really searching and seemed really earnest. And then he seemed to be moving on, and then suddenly he just disappeared. And he was really hard to contact. He didn't want to have any contact. He finally said, yeah, look, I've decided I'm not going to follow Jesus. Didn't want to talk about it. I was feeling pretty sad about that. I'd spent a lot of time with him. I thought he was getting what was happening. And I just started praying, God, I just like one more opportunity to see Aki. And I was praying this for about 2 weeks. Another wet night, happens a lot. I'd met someone in the city to do some discipleship with. Normally that went for a long time, and I'd say at the end, I need to go, because he talked a lot. This night he said, I need to go, it's time to go. That was like, whoa, that's a bit weird. Okay, see ya. I went to get a public bike. There were none at the rack. Just as I arrive at the rack, there's a bike arrive, and I get on the bike, great. Start riding home, get to a set of lights that I probably shouldn't say, but I normally just cross the lights. I didn't wait for them to change, but tonight I thought, I'll just wait. There's no cars around anyway. I cross at these lights on the bike, and I look to my left, and I see this person. I think that shadow is Aki, and it was.
Wow.
And out of 4 million people in the city, on this cold, wet night, on this corner where I wouldn't expect to see Aki was Aki, and we had a 20-minute conversation.
Wow.
And I just can see the extent of God's mercy to me in that, that he actually gave me that opportunity. Aki didn't change his position or anything, but just I was able to say, God, you're in control of this, not me. And that was just it really changed, again, my prayer life, just learning to trust God with the people that I'm praying for, and seeing how much God cared. Yeah.
I'm curious, through your time on the field, was there moments that you were able to use, I guess, prayer as a tool for witnessing to the people around you?
Yeah, so the Fiesta ice cream incident, we actually had people say to us, this is one of the nicest fiestas that we've ever had, the nice, which is really odd when you can't even speak the language properly and so on. And so we were able to say, actually, we've been inviting God into this space. That would, people were still quite resistant, but certainly by the end, their recognition that all the answers they wanted to have, which was like, oh, it must be because they're Australians, or they've read the right books, or they've just got they're just better than us. They'd go, actually, it seems to be their faith. It's not the answer we want, but, and that's nothing about us. It's really about just how God was very kind in letting that come out. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. I guess, do you have any practical tips that you could share with young adults who are struggling with their prayer life, or even different books that you've read? I'm a good book nerd, so anything you could share on that as well.
Yeah, good question. I like on the book one, I actually find reading good Christian biographies the best place to get my prayer life encouraged. I'm showing my age here, but to be honest, things like The Hiding Place, Corrie ten Boom, or Brother Andrew, like as you read their stories and you hear how they learn to pray, that really encourages me because it's real life prayer. So picking up a biography, I think, is what really helps me in my prayer life. I think another thing that helps me is I've realized that some of us identify people go, oh, that person just prays a lot, like they're a real prayer warrior, whatever. It helped me remember one day that at some point they were young adults and they probably struggled as well. So rather than just holding them in awe and saying, wow, saying, I wonder if because they've come to that point, they could actually help me. Would I get alongside them and ask, tell me about how you've ended up being this kind of person that when I look at, I say, there's a praying life here. Yeah. I think learning to hear God's voice is really important. Like in the days before mobile phones that tell you who's calling you, like if someone rang up on the old landline, sometimes they'd say hello and you go, oh, hi, Dad, because you just knew their voice. And if someone else rang up and said hello and you went, I'm embarrassed, but I have no idea who this is, and they go, oh, it's your best friend, George. It's like, you knew how to hear people's voices, or like you did at a party, right? You're talking to someone and you hear this voice, I know that person. I actually think that skill's been lost a bit, and actually reading God's word and learning to hear his voice is so that you can hear his voice and then you say, yeah, this is God. So I reckon working on that skill is really important. And you get it wrong at the beginning, and that doesn't matter. What matters is you going, oh, yeah, now I know this is God talking.
That's interesting. I think I would love to do a whole podcast on hearing God's voice. I've always found that a hard concept to wrap my head around as a scientific-minded, very practical-minded, rational thinker. So we'll have to pencil that in, I think, for a whole episode because it's so interesting and such a good idea. Important discipline to learn. So thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Maybe my last tip would be make prayer physical. I know sometimes we talk about so the examples might be to talk or to write, whatever, but I'd want to go further than that. It might be standing, like intentionally standing when you pray for a while, or maybe lying down or sitting, like actually asking the question, where am I? In fact, in terms of the physical thing, where are you looking when you're talking to God, are you looking down with your eyes closed like this? Could you imagine asking someone for a cup of tea that way? May I have a cup of tea, please? Like, you wouldn't do that. You look someone in the eye. So are you looking up? I mean, that's what Jesus did. He looked up as a way of signaling he was looking at God, and he had his arms open. He was actually in a relationship. How does your body posture relate to who you're talking to and why you might have struggled praying? I mean, talking to someone like this is not helpful. So maybe that's got something to do with a practical way of saying, what is my body doing at this moment and how am I communicating? Yeah.
There's a podcast that I listen to, or a sermon series that I listen to about spiritual disciplines. And one of the spiritual disciplines was prayer, and he was talking about his rhythms and routines of how he prays. And he has a special dedicated chair in his house that is his devotional and prayer chair. And it's this special chair that's set aside, and he pretty much only reads his Bible and prays in that chair. And I think that's another good way to physically symbolize the fact that you're praying and remind yourself that you're praying and that you're in relationship with Jesus. So I think that's a really great point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like that one too. I think it is. It's actually the intentionality. How am I going to relate here at this point? And involving my whole self in that. Yeah.
And I think another thing that I've learnt from one of my mentors about prayer is that, as you said, we're called to have a praying life, not a prayer life. So we're called to pray every day, all the time. So I think there's times where I'll sit down and I'll pray for 5-10 minutes, however long. But I'm also praying all the time as I go about my daily life.
Activities.
As I'm driving my car and as I'm having conversations with people. So I think that's another way to kind of really physically understand what it means to have a praying life. Is that it's just part of your day is Jesus is walking alongside you, by your side, and you can be in conversation with him.
I know when I've read parts of Brother Lawrence's book, he talks about just washing the dishes, making it prayer, making it worship, like anything that you're doing. It's just natural. It's like breathing, like just consciously aware that God is with you. Yeah.
Thank you for all that you've offered. I think maybe we'll add some of those biographies that you suggested earlier into the description of the podcast so that people can go and find those. Did you have anything else you wanted to add for our listeners?
No, it's all good. Like, it's a great privilege just to chat with you guys and open up something that I think is such an integral part of growing spiritually. So thanks for the chance.
No worries. And is there any way that our listeners could, or anywhere that our listeners could go to find more about prayer and prayer with CMS?
Look, absolutely. So definitely head to the CMS website, and there, if you go to cms.org.au and particularly look at the Victoria bit, you'll see we have prayer days. There's another one coming up in June. So I encourage you to find out more about that. And we're doing that remotely. So it's a great opportunity to engage in a prayer way. We use an app called PrayerMate. So you might want to investigate that as a way of being involved in world mission prayer, because that'll give you prayer points for every day and up-to-date prayer for what's going on around the world with CMS missionaries.
Yeah, awesome.
Cool. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's a privilege to chat to you, and I'm always so encouraged by the knowledge that you have, and it's not just knowledge, but it's experience. I witness you praying and being prayerful in all aspects of the life that I see in relationship with you. So I'm always really encouraged. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really challenged and encouraged to continue developing my prayer life. And I really resonate with the point of it's so tempting to look at people like yourself and older people who have great, rich prayer lives and think, how on earth did they get there? Yeah. But it's important to remember that we are young adults.
And they started like us.
They started like
That's
us. That's right. So thank you very much. It's great to have you on. And I'm sure we will see you at the next CMS event online.
Or staff meeting.
Or staff meeting.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Andrew.
See ya.
See ya.
See ya.
temptation. God deliver us from the enemy. And yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Forever, Lord. And give us each moment all that we need. Forgive us our sins as we forgive the ones who have sinned against us. Our Father in heaven, and lead us not into temptation, but God deliver us from the enemies. Yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Forever, Lord. Our Father, have your way on the earth. Your will be done. Our Father, have your way on the earth. Our will be done. Oh, Father, have your way on the earth. Your will be done. Yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever.
So, Tilly, what stood out to you when we were chatting to Andrew?
I think one of the favorite things that I heard Andrew say was when he corrected that it's not just a prayer life, but it's actually a praying life, and that's actually a continuous thing that we're engaged in. And it brought back to me what Paul must have envisioned when he wrote in 1 Thessalonians to pray without ceasing, and that is literally a praying life. It's continuous. It's not just, we get up in the morning and we do a quick verse of the day, or we read a little devotion on our phone app, and then, that's it. And we go out for the rest of the day with work and we forget about him. But he's actually constant. that he doesn't forget about us even when we're not mindful of him. And likewise at night, we do our quick thank you God for today and go to bed, and as well, that's it. And we almost kind of just push him aside. But I think it really is pray without ceasing. Like that's such a challenge today with so many distractions, but I was really encouraged that of that reminder. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, that's cool. I think for me, just chatting to Andrew reminds me of how the CMS office prays, and I just find that extremely encouraging. We have a prayer diary that has all of the CMS Australian missionaries in it, separated in the different nations that they're serving, and every single day at 12 o'clock we stop and we pray for these people, for different nations each day. And that's just such a good example of not just the constant day-to-day prayer, but also that regimented, structured prayer time.
Yeah.
It's a discipline that we need to be doing and that we need to be practicing and getting better at.
Yeah.
It's something that I personally really suck at, but I think being part of the CMS office has been a really great way to remind me that it is a discipline, regardless of how you feel, that prayer is just so important.
Yeah. And I think it's strange that, we are in this time of COVID, everything's shut down. We only have 4 reasons to leave the house now, and all of us are working from home. And so it's kind of this two-sided coin where all of a sudden we have this abundance amount of time, and we can either be using it and take advantage of it and spend more time with God and getting to know him and dive into the word, or it's a time that we can get even more distracted and just start binging on Netflix and watch all of the Marvel movies or whatever it is. Yeah. And I think that that's a real challenge that we have to overcome. Yeah,
I'm pretty convinced that God has been really, or one of the ways that God is being so good and gracious to us in this time of isolation is we have no excuse to not be investing in our relationship with Jesus. What Absolutely. A great time to be refining and shaping our discipline and the way that we spend alone time with God.
Yeah.
For a external processing intense extrovert, I just find this so hard. But it's been really great to just have dedicated time every single day to practice solitude, practice spending time with God.
Yeah.
The way that I've been doing that is just like every other 20-something-year-old, I'm making sourdough starter. I'm sure all of you at home are doing that too.
Totally.
But I'm trying to get into the routine regardless of what I have on that day. If I'm working or not working, or if I've got nothing planned, I set my alarm at 7:30. I get up, I feed my sourdough starter like a good father. But
what
then
do you feed it?
Just flour.
Okay.
But then I spend time just with God, reading the Bible and praying. And this is something that I'm just really bad at in the busyness of my usual life. But this time of isolation has just provided the opportunity for me to do that and to spend the time doing that.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, I hope that you were encouraged by what Andrew had to offer. And I encourage you to comment below what you were encouraged by, or send us a message. We would love to chat to you about that and start a dialogue about prayer and about pursuing a healthier prayer life.
Thanks for tuning in to the Young Adult Collective podcast.
You can find other episodes of our podcast and stay up to date by following us on Facebook or Instagram by searching the Young Adult Collective. Our podcast is also available on all major podcasting platforms as well as on YouTube.
If you would like to find out more about anything that we have mentioned throughout the show, we will leave our email in the description.
But until next time, thanks so much for watching.